We did our first event with each other maybe 6 years ago. You were part of our Sacred Sexuality online conference. You were then a part of our Divine Masculine online conference, right? And we've done a couple of other events since then, including the Sexual Renaissance, Reemergence of Sacred Sexuality. And as I said to you when I was creating this, man, like anything that really has to do with this information plus more, you're definitely the first person that comes to mind, because the experiences I've had with you, even though they've been like one every 2 years, basically for the last 6 years, have really stuck with me. And to me, you are really somebody that I, not, for lack of a better term, like not look up to, but appreciate the information and your imprint on this earth, because you have helped me really find who I am as a, you know, in this world of being a masculine person living in this earth. And at this point in my life, like when we were talking about this event leading up to it, the whole time, like I was doing this like portal to ascension, I really still had something missing within me. I didn't love myself. I was still coming from a lot of wounds, a lot to do with being raised in a conservative Indian family. And, you know, the conversation about sexuality, who we are, relationships were never really discussed. And then also being molested as a child, I was doing this, and a lot of this happened. Portal to Ascension really came out of me exploring how to heal my sexual energy. That was like the first reason why I created this. I was looking for solutions, so I started working with people that could provide it to me. Not until maybe this year, right? Like 16 years later of really doing this work, have I started figuring out what is up with me and how it works, and even loving myself. And so I just want to honor you, because your information, your presence, even online when we don't even talking directly, has really assisted me to get to this place.
Great honor. Thank you for that. And I feel that connection, that brotherhood connection through the networks, virtual and ethers. I feel what you're doing. I feel your flow. And I'm a big supporter. And yeah, happy to be on this journey. And I didn't know what direction this talk would take, but I think you're going to enjoy it, because it's really in line with what you just shared.
Beautiful, brother. Okay, take it away.
All right. So, yeah, so I'm guessing that there's been like a lot of talking, and those of you that have been on have been getting a lot of information towards you. Crystal Dawn is a life force, an unstoppable life force, and her downloads are tremendous. So in the energy of solstice and in the energy of what I'm going to be speaking about, which is remember, or remembering, or awakening, there's an energy of quiet that needs to descend upon us. So I'm at the solstice gathering. You might hear some background noise, which is coming from the 20 or so people outside, and then there's a few other people watching live here. So excuse me for any sound disruptions. But besides that, let's just take a moment of dropping in together and taking a breath with the sound of the exhale. And really feeling yourself connecting to your seat, maybe becoming a bit more conscious of the way you're sitting, and see what you could do to bring more presence. Feeling yourself on this planet, as part of this planet. Moving up, feeling your heart alive, beating into this body, both the earth and connecting upwards to the heavens. Taking in a deep breath from there. And recognizing there is a mystery, and that the heavens represent, and that we are just on this journey trying to figure it all out. And we're coming at such a wild time. It's a time of exponential consciousness coming through, exponential access to information. And with this sometimes comes an overwhelm and a disconnection. So we also, with all the social media, are taking one side and the other side, and it's like everything is up. And in addition, for it to being a time of consciousness, it's also a time of mass transition. The old way is just not doing it anymore. And what I mean by the old way is the old program. We all have entered into this matrix under, you could see it as a software program. We didn't have choice in it. We were born into it, and we picked them up differently, whether it be culturally, religious, environmentally, whatever it was. We picked up all these influences. And so part of the talk and that I'm going to be giving today is about returning to the masculine essence, and it's more designed. I know when we speak about masculine, we often acknowledge it as a place that each individual is both masculine and feminine. And so we could usually, when we speak of the masculine, it's like, okay, we each have masculine, each and every one of us. When I was designing this course or this talk, high level, I had thought about speaking directly to men, and that's what I'm going to be doing. And so when I said the masculine, I'm speaking of the masculine within men. What's men's role in transformation and transition of the times today? And it doesn't mean that if you're in any other gender that you can't pick up these pieces. It's personal. It's kind of universal. But my intention here is to give a transmission to any person in male bodies. And when I was speaking about the crazy times, it's like, it's also a piece around shifting of power and shifting of attention and focus. And so as men, historically, the world was built around serving our needs as the driving forces in a capitalistic culture. And I'm talking, like 1950s before and up until just recently. It's maybe 50 years or even 30 years where we're actually consciously changing the culture towards sharing and shifting power and whatnot. So all that said, it's like, what's men's roles? And these days, there's been a lot of blowback on men as a whole for the crimes or the wrongdoings of a whole past, a whole lineage, a whole ancestry of men. And so, it's part of our role to sit in that fire and witness and watch what is coming back as this blowback from a culture we co-created one way or another. And so the traditional ways of men have been doing things, even if they're coming from their highest self in the traditional perspective, it came with a script, and it related to how we dealt with women. It dealt with how we acted amongst men. It dealt with how we spoke about women in front of other men, and so on. And so this is a culture that is quickly on its way out. It's being pushed out. It's being blown out. It's awesome. I'm a big supporter of that. As well as, acknowledging that we are in this transitory time, and it doesn't mean that it's going to be easy and that it should be easy, and nor that it's going to be done just because we started acknowledging things. Things take time to evolve, but the beautiful thing that we could rest into is the fact that we are part of the evolution if we choose to be. And so, some pieces of the past is like, man up, men tell men you can't cry, boys don't cry, man up, have some balls, don't be a pussy. The worst insult one could get is don't be a pussy, which is always interesting because pussies take a beating and they keep going, and testicles. They're so very fragile. But that's a side note. So as we look at this transitory piece, I'm going to be speaking from my perspective as what it has been to be a man in the last 40 years. I am coming from the position of being Generation XY, born in 1978. So I'm the end of Generation X, the beginning of Generation Y, and not a millennial. So that said, is like I've seen a major transition in the culture, a major way of the way boys were allowed to act, boys were encouraged to act, the role of and access to pornography, how that has completely changed. And now, you know, what are we supposed to do? How are we supposed to be? Are we supposed to be, you know, serving women, or are we supposed to be allowing them to be completely equal and free? And that means like opening their own doors and not feeling into the whole chivalry anymore. Like it's like we're drawn. And I think the big part of the confusion is that I don't feel that women absolutely know exactly how men want to show up for them right now, nowadays. There's a part of them that wants their independence and their freedom and to be their sovereignty and to be acknowledged as powerful beings. But at the same time, there's a part of them that wants to be seen, that wants to be catered to, that wants to be served, that wants to be loved in a very tender and surrendered way. And so where does that leave us? So the title of this presentation is called Remember, the Masculine's Role in Transformation. And remember is a play on words. It's I took the M-E-M in the middle and we changed it to M-E-N. And so this is a week-long transformational retreat that I host annually, biannually. Maybe this year we're going to have it 4 times. And I do it with 3 other brothers, Nimai, Philippe, and Gil. And it's a program that we co-created for a journey for men to find a brotherhood, and within that brotherhood, allow themselves to explore their truest self, from their darkest self to their most inspiring, heart-driven self. And so it's a 5-day program. And so what I want to share with you is what I have harvested from this program that has been run twice already. And what makes this program different from most personal transformation platforms, whether it be ISTA or Mankind Project or whatnot, is that we are specifically playing on the remembering that we can be part of something, a collective. And this collective starts first with ourself related to our brotherhood, and our brotherhood, how we serve the earth and the planet. So it's recognizing that in our current technological day and age, where we're super connected in the internet, is that we don't have authentic connection. We have a version of connection, but when it comes to true connection in person, it's let's just say that with the advent of technology and social media, that the quality of connection has waned. And Remember is supporting men to reconnect to a deeper brotherhood, and a brotherhood that is here to support you to go on a deeper journey of self-discovery and know that you're always connected to something bigger. So I'm just looking at some of my notes, making sure that everything I want to speak about, I'm getting through. So yeah, I'm also open to questions. Neil, at any time, if there's a question that needs to be interjected, please come on, because I can't read the chat and look at my notes and deliver everything all at the same time. So before I go into transmission, I just want to speak a bit about myself. Where am I coming from? Like I was saying, Generation XY, I've seen the transformation. I've been with the International School of Temple Arts for the last 5 years. I'm a facilitator of this work. And I've spent over 2,000 hours in transformational circles, supporting men and women to access more personal power, to live a more sovereign lifestyle. And from there, I had a personal calling to move into brotherhood work. First of all, I got called from a brother saying, hey, I want to do brother work. Are you in? And I'm like, yes, I was thinking of that, and let's do it. And one of the pieces of why I want to do brother work is because as a man growing up, we weren't raised with the how to be an integrous man. If we were lucky, we were born into a family unit that had a strong fatherly presence, or uncles and whatnot, to really guide men into rites of passage, which would support them to treat people fairly, justly, lovingly, and so on, and have like a feeling of self-love. And so through my journey, I've made some mistakes, which I'm not proud of. And so a big part of creating Remember was to offer men who are seeking, whether it be education, whether it be spiritual guidance, whether it be redemption, whatever they're looking for, they could come and they could put their souls, their hearts on the altar, and we can witness them in their pain, in their truth, in their authenticity, and as a unit support them into remembering themselves. So the name Remember comes from two places. Number one, it's the concept of thinking back, remembering our past. What was the man's role on the planet? What did we serve? What would we choose to serve? What did our community expect us and value us to serve and deliver to community? That's what the exploration of this brotherhood journey is. It's a remembering. So we need to stop and be silent and pause and listen. And solstice is the perfect time for it. So solstice tonight is at 11:19. My suggestion is to really take some time alone and quiet to pause and remember. And the second piece of Remember is, it's the story of Isis and Osiris, is how Osiris was in a battle with his brother Set, and in this war, he got captured, killed, and got cut up into 7 pieces and sent over all over the planet, and his penis, phallus, was done with the best thing a criminal could do, is throw it to the alligators, and the alligators ate the phallus. And so Remember is also about Isis's role in going and pick up the 7 pieces, putting it all back together, praying over this masculine body, and resurrecting, or she fashioned a phallus out of gold and put it in her place. And with that, they gave birth to the sun god, the falcon-headed god Horus, which is the eye of Horus, the big picture, the ability to see. And so Remember is about remembering the past, as well as going and pick up all of the soul loss that we have experienced throughout our life, throughout the traumas, the wounds, the assaults, the perpetrations, whatever it be where we lost soul parts. It's about going and get all those soul parts and retrieving them and taking them and bringing them back into integration. So what can we do? What is our role? And so today, my goal is to give you a path into the foundation of transformation. Ultimately, we want to transform the planet. There's a bunch of activists all over the world picketing front line and, really telling the outside world that something needs to change. But the cornerstone of transformation is internal. And the outside world, that's the secret, is that the outside world will never, ever change until collectively and individually we start to do the inner process and the inner healing, so that when we meet the world, we're meeting the world from a much more complete and integrated perspective. So, I want to begin with some of the core challenges that the men that I've been around at Remember have brought to presence. So I want to present them first as like the themes of the main things, difficulties or challenges that we're having as men meeting the world in today's age. So all my what I'm sharing is from my perspective, my life perspective, my personal journey into being wounded, being the perpetrator, coming to love, and then saying, how can I show up in my most powerful self? And so archetypally, when we did Remember on the first night, the most important thing to do was dynamically find out what is the major undercurrent challenge that's occurring. And so I want to read you a few themes. Number one, it's about power, about how can we access more power? How do we hold power? How do we share power? And what do we do if we feel we're losing power? And what impact does that play on us? So this role of power, which is great, because when we think about, is one of the things that the greatest shadows of man is sex, power, and money. And so the first thing that these men brought up to question and say, hey, let's lay this out. Let's look at it. Let's break it down, is power. The second piece was the theme around emotions, how to deal with aggression, stuckness, what to do when we're feeling stuck, and how to deal with pain and or accept pain. So another celebration I want to have here is the fact that in the old way, it was this piece of men are not allowed to express their emotions. Expressing their emotions brought about a certain level of bullying. And so we didn't talk about this. And here we have a new collective of men sitting together around the circle. And the second thing after power that they're bringing up is emotions. It's like how to deal with our emotions. So we're listening. So for the women out there who are out watching, it's like I want to say, we're listening. Men are recognizing that they can't stay dealing with the way they meet the world from this disconnected, emotionally disconnected place. We're asking ourselves the tough questions, including, what do we do with our aggression? The third, love and connection. So it's a whole piece on, so love, connection, and flow were the themes that emerged. So flow, it's like we're talking about life force flow. So we have this piece of love and intimacy and relationships. How are we supposed to relate in this day and age when intimacy is so rare to have because there's so much connection through social media, so difficult to get into long-term relationships? That has to do with the degradation of values culturally, and commitment are and this is both sexes, all sexes. This is all what's playing out. So regardless, we weren't, and in none of our conversation was beautiful is that none of it was talking about blame or like, complaining about power loss and everything. It was all, how do we meet it? The world is changing. We're not in resistance. How do we meet it now that it's changed? The hands, it's a new hand, and we have to play the hand based on the cards that are in our hand. So how do we meet love? What is connection? What is the value of connection? And what is the role of life force flow and energy flow? And I'll get back to that later, hopefully. We also went through, in that same topic, pieces on attachment and compersion. Compersion, in a nutshell, is the opposite of jealousy. We experienced conflict resolution. So as the brotherhood transforms, as we become more conscious, as we bring more energy into our brotherhood, what do we do with conflict? Because ultimately this idea that conflict will not emerge and everything is peace and love and rainbows and unicorns is obviously inaccurate. So what do we do with conflict resolution? How do we have conflict resolution coming from a new state? And that new state, ultimately, what it has come to, is a piece of recognizing that in order for us to be in our most powerful expression is two things. Number one, we have to be driven by our heart. We have to put our heart at the central cornerstone of our way of relating into the world. And secondly, it is about, especially as men, is about living the soul purpose. And I say especially as men, it's a bit inaccurate, but why I said that is that, men oftentimes, if they don't find their purpose in their life, they will spin out into a depressive state, and they won't know why, but it's because men's most driving force is absolutely finding their purpose, and their purpose in relation to their spouse, in relation to their community, in relation to their mission, in relation to the transformation of the planet. So, soul purpose. So those are a bit of the themes that we went through at Remember. And I'm going to speak a bit about how we got there and what we did with it. So if we speak about the masculine energy, if we speak about, so I'm speaking like the universal energy of the masculine, not masculine as man. I would say the cornerstone of meeting the world is through the place of hold space, create safety, and witness without judgment. This is the ultimate energy of the masculine, as well as presence. So presence, stillness, hold space, create safety, witness without judgment. And these qualities are really the qualities that support us to be dropped in anchors for our community, like really rods of support for our community. And what does it look like? So presence to me is the absolute cornerstone of any interaction, whether it be with yourself or with the outside world. If you're not present, you're not really in an authentic connection. So your capacity to show up and to give your full attention, not 70% of your attention, not 90% of attention, but 99.9% of your attention into the current experience. When that current experience is happening in the present moment, in the present moment, that is the closest thing that we can be connected to the energy of the divine. So presence is what connects us to the divine. Secondly, stillness, in our insides is that practice of coming into stillness or ease. So I'll talk about ease a bit later. But stillness is that place in our self where we're not pushing, we're not pulling, we're not struggling, we're not trying, but we're just in the state of being. We are in that infinite, spacious expansion of ease and stillness. Holding space is that quality of being able to create an environment, no matter how big, whether physical or energetic, which that you have decided to really take responsibility in creating a container. So you created this container. So 4 walls in a room is space, and the walls are the space holder. But when a person walks in intentionally into a difficult conversation, for example, or a difficult situation or a relational breakdown, ultimately the space wants to create a container for the exploration. So the masculine is the container. Then we have create safety. So once we have this container, then we are meeting the space from an energetic of creating safety. So if we are, flailing or being upset or like being judgmental, obviously that is not the quality of safety and or the quality of the awakened masculine. It's a quality, it exists, all the qualities exist, we love them all, but it's not one of the awakened masculine. And then finally, we have witnesses without judgment. And so the piece of witnessing without judgment is that no matter what happens here, that we don't have to come to it with a judgment as though something needs to change in order for it to be okay. So that's witnessing without judgment. It's like being able to be in the center of the storm, watching, whatever it is, from a breakdown, a fight, an expression of pain, an expression of joy, an expression of ecstasy, whatever it is, that it is not met with an energy of judgment. So that once we have presence, stillness, or ease, the space, the safety, and the lack of judgment, now we have created a magical container for the feminine to arise and to show herself. And that feminine could be in the form of a woman, or it could be in the form of emotions, or it could be form of an expression, art, a musical. But that's what emerges when there's a safety and a well-held container and presence. So ultimately, when a man wants to show up for a beloved, with whatever gender that is, and wants to hold the pole of masculinity, that at the foundation, they'll come in with this energy. So we went through what a brotherhood, the new brotherhood vision that we're envisioning that we want to bring through. We went through the challenges that men have. We talked about from a transpersonal collective way, what is the masculine archetype, the best way one could show up from the masculine. The next thing I'm going to speak to is what I offer as a prescription to brothers out into the world to step up in power. This is what we have discovered through Remember, through my personal path, through watching people transform across the planet, as the way to really become a leader in transformation on the planet. And the first step would be introspection. So before we want to change anything on the outside, it's got to change internally. We have to go inside and be ready to look at, real minors, real diamond miners, the inner diamond, will go straight to the source, and we'll work on stuff related to childhood wounds, wounds that emerged between the ages of 0, or even prenatal till around 7, 8 years old. This is a very formative time in your life. Any key messages that you heard on repetition, or even once, all you needed to hear is once as well, but anything that you heard on repetition specifically has been created an imprint of which you move through the world as a reference point to. So you're not even authentically moving through the world with the conscious stimuli that's coming in front of you, but with the reference point for how you dealt with the trauma, how you dealt with an abuse, whether it be that you saw or that you experienced. It could have been even a word that your mom said to your brother in passing, or your father. If there was a moment, if your mom ever emasculated your father, or if your father ever told your mother she was worthless. All these create imprints and reference points to the way we are subconsciously moving through the world, because we are referring to that as the cornerstone. And the defense or the strategy that we came up to deal with that moment has become the tool that we use in the world. And oftentimes that piece is the most limiting aspect of you to reach your true power and your true potential. So mind that gold, mind that coal that will become diamonds. So after introspection and inner work, guess what? There's more introspection and inner work. It's shadow work. And shadow work is similar to that piece. Doing the inner child work is considered doing shadow work as well. But shadow work has much more to do with that which you don't know about yourself. It's what you don't know, ultimately. And when you don't know that you don't know something about yourself, and it is that thing that everybody else sees, that is often the worst case, because the only person you're tricking is yourself. So you have this strategy, and you're moving through the world, and everybody sees through it except yourself. So these things are things that actually really, really, really leak energy and power. And what is often at the cornerstone of shadow work is the commitment to going after, at the core, what creates shame in your life. I say that shame is probably the thing that keeps trauma stuck. So as long as you have shame, your trauma will be stuck. Picture your shame in some form and put it in sludge, like an oil spill. And that is what shame is to your trauma. So the shadow work is about, having the courage to face your fear, that's ultimately, and your shame and your guilt. Ultimately, courage is not the absence of fear, but is the presence of fear, but choosing to move forward regardless. That's at the essence of courage. So really having the courage to go into down into the cave where the dragon is resting and is protecting a great pot of gold, but this dragon represents all that you hold as wounds and reference points and dramas and traumas and inner chaoses. So in order to become in order to really serve the collective as men, what I am calling to is deep commitment to shadow work, and like really facing the fear, feeling the courage in your body and saying, I owe this to myself. I owe this to being the best version of myself. I owe this to being the greatest powerful creator that I can be to myself, so that I can be actually here. Why I intended to come here as a soul into this body is to bring myself fully. But because of shadow and inner child work, we limit ourselves, which blocks that out. And so as we come into integration of all these pieces, it is then and only then that we can actually meet the world and actually serve powerfully. Because as long as we have all these leaks and these holes in our dinghy, in our little boat that we're going through the cosmos with, it's like we're going to be spending most of our energy bailing the water. So that's what we're doing to energy that is being unconsciously, subconsciously leaked towards not dealing with our shadow stuff. And so the question then comes up, all right, I'm going to do this shadow work, but there's going to be tons of emotion that comes up. Yes, you're going to have aggression. You're going to have anger. You're going to have resentment. You're going to have bitterness. You're going to have maybe, of course, sadness, despair. These are all dense emotions that culturally we don't give ourselves permission to feel or even discuss it. So I'm here and I'm standing for it. I'm standing for the normal, how normal it is to have these feelings and emotions. And what I don't think is normal is not having a healthy outlet to move these emotions. And so I've went through the Western school system as a young boy, as a man, as a child, as whatever it was, and nowhere in any of that foundational work have we ever been taught of how to take proper responsibility of our emotions. And so by not knowing how to deal with our emotions, it's always given to the parents to do that. But again, how many families, especially nowadays, are single family homes? It's an epidemic. So we have to assume that children are not getting this education of how to properly move emotion. So where did we get it? We didn't get it. So we made messes in our life. It's normal. So I believe in a strong routine of emotional hygiene. And so emotional hygiene is about first of all, doing the shadow work and moving this aggressive or stuck energies. I say aggressive because I have aggression, but you might have something else. So whatever your shadow is in terms of dense emotions, is that we want to see them, we want to feel them, and we want to move them. And so at EPSIODE, the International School of Temple Arts, we teach a thing that says, that's basically the 7 tools of emotional release. I'm going to have a explanation of the 7 tools of emotional release on my podcast on SoundCloud next week. So stay tuned to that, Frank Mondeose on SoundCloud, where I'll go into depth of the 7 tools of emotional release. So these are tools that give us permission to fully express our emotions in a healthy and responsible way, one that is not projecting onto somebody and demeaning somebody. And I'll give you one, for example. They're very simple, they're very intuitive, they're very instinctual. When a child is having a trauma in the grocery store or at home and they're rolling around on the floor and they're, doing all kinds of movements, that's one emotional release technique that's called tantrum. Excuse me, I got a blank. It's called a tantrum. And so that's one way. Another one is a hand scream. You put your hands to your mouth and you scream. So you could really move all your rage like this. And there's 7 more, and they really place the gamut of all the quality of your emotions. But why is it important to do emotional hygiene? It's important to do emotional hygiene because we want to stay current. And when I say current, I speak it from 3 levels. The first level is I want to be in a state of ease. In order for me to be in a state of ease, I have to acknowledge all dense emotion. And when I feel this dense emotion, I have to allow it to run. If I do what I've done in the past, which is suppress and repress, the only result is going to be a steam cooker that's going to, explode eventually. Or we're so good at repressing and suppressing that we actually create dis-ease. So the opposite of ease is dis-ease. And dis-ease is like what causes disease, cancer and whatnot. It's when we are not in our ease in our body that we become such great experts at repression and suppression of our emotion that we actually create sickness in our body. We are the creators of our reality. So number one, being emotionally current is important because I want to be in my ease. Number two, being emotionally current based on the fact that when I meet a situation, a difficult situation, a challenging situation, I want to be meeting it from a current state, not from the state where I'm emotionally jumping to a time when I was 8 years old when I didn't get my way or somebody did X, Y, or Z to me. And now I have all this backlog of emotion that shows up and I start to rage or break down in sadness for the person in front of us. And all they said was, you know, a very benign comment about whatever. And so what ends up happening is that touches you so deeply because you're not really responding to the comment, you're responding to what the comment triggered, which was an old memory. So as long as you're not emotionally current, you basically have like baggage in the basement that is not serving you. And so it's not allowing you to meet the world powerfully and with your greatest clarity. And when we are current, we gain value, we gain power. So like emotional currency, there's currency is about value, and behind unmoved emotion is tremendous untapped power. Behind unmoved emotion is tremendous untapped power. So the only way we get access to the power is by facing the dragon, meeting the dragon, healing the wound that is blocking us from mining the gold. And the gold is coming into resolution or ease with that which stops you from being your most authentic, most beautiful self. Emotional hygiene, do it. Then the other piece around, you know, being a man is our capacity to hold. One of the comments that I've heard from a lot of women that step into masculine roles, whether it be during sexuality or whatnot, or just having a female lover, is that they're like, oh my God, I didn't realize how much men hold. It's like during lovemaking, all the things that they're just like preparing and supporting that's completely unseen from the feminine. And it's like, wow, to be able to drop into that masculine piece really gives me a greater appreciation of the masculine, or what men hold in the daily. And so what I want to support is for men to have a larger capacity to hold greater chaos, actually. You know, the feminine, especially as she's going through her healing, like she will go through a certain level of chaos and movement of energy. And if you're in a partnership and in a romantic relationship, you can be assured that all your stuff is coming up, because the best way for people's stuff to come up is have a reflection of somebody else that you consider that you're in love with. So all your shit comes up. So the best thing you could do as a man is expand your capacity to hold. And the best way to expand your capacity to hold dense energy and chaotic energy is to do emotional release, become emotionally current. This will support you to have less anxiety, less overwhelm. When you do emotional release, even as an empath, it expands your capacity to feel even more, and it doesn't become overwhelming. And ultimately, having less attachment. If you're attached to outcomes, then you're more emotionally hooked into outcomes. And then the best way for you to go into suffering and pain is to be attached to outcomes. So the less you're attached to an outcome, the more you'll have the capability to rest in your ease. I'm wondering how that's landing. I'm just like delivering. Neil, at any time, if you have anything you want to interject, let me know. Time checked is 3:35. I have another 25 minutes, and I'll continue going and maybe stop 10 or 15 minutes before to see if there's any questions. So another piece.
It's really good. Sorry.
Pardon?
Yeah, I was just saying, because you just asked for me, I was saying, yeah, it's beautiful, perfect. We do have a couple questions that come in, but yeah, continue, and then I'll bring them up towards the end.
I want to give like one more piece and around like the real what I think is the pièce de résistance, the climax here is ultimately man's role in planetary transformation is connecting with the heart. Ultimately, the mind is a great servant, but it's a horrible master. That we know that saying. And I would say the genitals are great at bringing you pleasure, but they're really focused on instant gratification. And sometimes that instant gratification leads us into like hedonism. Hedonism is this aspect of like taking what you could get now and not really thinking of the consequences, because it's just the highest cornerstone of existence is pleasure now. Epicurean will like still put pleasure as the cornerstone of what he's striving for, but he's willing to forego instant gratification for longer term pleasure. So mind is a great servant, horrible master, because the mind will like spin you into like I come across tons of people, and the people that are the most stuck, that have the most resistance to coming into their greatest version or their version of transformation and their heart, is when they are stuck in the mind and the how and the why and the connection and the prove it to me. And there's a piece of this work of transformation that is not about proof. It's about faith, and not faith in God or not faith in religion, but faith that as you commit to the transformational work of self and you become a better person. What I mean by better person is that you're more authentic and more giving and more vulnerable of yourself into the world in service of the higher good. Well, then you're taken care of. You're taken care of one way or another, but it takes work. And so the cornerstone here is the heart. It's the piece around meeting the world, like I said before, present. So if you're going to choose to be somewhere, be there. If you're going to choose to be on a date, be on a date. And stay focused for the 2 hours that you're together. If you're going to be in a relationship for a month, be in the relationship for a month. Go on that journey. Go into the depths of it. The depth is not about time. The depth is your commitment and choice towards being present and being ruthlessly authentic and ruthlessly vulnerable. That is what the heart wants. The heart wants connection. And the best way to connection is not to put on the mask, hey, this is me, this is who you want to see, so isn't this romantic and nice? No, that's not connection. Connection is about literally showing yourself from the inside and out. And this is what we saw at Remember. For 5 days, we had 24 men with the facilitators go into a journey where they opened their insides and they brought it outside for us all to look at. And the result was brothers coming together in tenderness, in heart, in support, in love, and there was a quality of togetherness and unity. And I hate to say hope because I don't like the word hope. Actually, I won't say hope. I'm going to say inspire. It was absolutely inspiring. It gave me excitement about what we can choose to create when we are willing to lead with our heart and put our heart on the altar, and know by putting our heart on the altar, there will be transformation through pain, because love and pain go together in some ways, especially in the romantic sense, because anytime you choose to move into love with another individual that you use as a reference point for your presentation or your offering of love, it often comes with some level of disappointment, whether it be small or big. It is going to come with a level of pain. So the avoidance of pain is not the path, but the willingness to be in the pain fully with full present authenticity, vulnerability, and depth and commitment, and really allowing it to flow through you. And this is why we need that piece of emotional hygiene and emotional release tools, because if you don't have these emotional release tools, then coping with difficult emotions or more dense emotions, which I have no judgment over, becomes more difficult because we don't have an outlet. You know, we need to be able to give ourselves outlets or ways to move that energy so that we can continuously keep diving into our heart. And when we do that, that cracks us open enough for our soul message to come through. So we're going through this world very driven. We have all the things, the noise, then we have our heart. And so if we present ourselves with our heart, we create more space for our full soul to drop in, because we're living with more authenticity. And so then the soul can drive the direction of our life. And then we will understand purpose. And when we understand purpose, then life will become exciting because you know where you're putting your energy. And sometimes we hook on to some very average ideas because we're looking for purpose, or we're looking the way to spend the time. And so part of what I'm offering or requesting from the brothers is that we step up, we do our inner work, we show up as integrated, grounded champions, stewards for this planet, and we stand for our sisters and our children. I have no children, I won't have children, but my commitment is to my brothers, my sisters, and the children of this planet for their inner transformation, so that once our inner worlds are renovated, then we can renovate the collective, because everything that's happening on this planet, we have to take responsibility for, because it is our collective consciousness. It's the density that we are in our vibration that is creating it. So my call to men and my call to transformation is be the change you want to be in the world. Do our inner work. Let's do our inner work. Let's come together in tribe, and let's stand for sharing power and sharing wisdom for our planet to have a renaissance, an awakening, and a return to love. Neil, that's what I got for now. Let's go with some questions.
Beautiful, man. Thank you. All right, so we have one question that came here. If anybody has questions, please do ask them. You can ask them in the Q&A area or the chat room, wherever you like. Even if you're on Facebook, we just had 20 new people join us on Facebook. So if you guys have any questions, let us know. But one question right here is about, I guess, gender roles and identity. Someone's asking here, what about for transgender men? Does this apply for them?
Yeah, so throughout the conversation, I've been attempting a lot to speak with as little gender as possible where I catch it, but I am speaking about men, as a man, for men, to men, and as a transgendered man, absolutely. That this, actually, you know, in many ways, what I'm saying is everything that I shared goes for men and women who want to play with all the poles. But the reason why I'm directing this to men is because I'm sounding the bell. I'm sounding the call. I'm saying, as a man, I'm calling on men to stand with me and make a commitment to their inner transformation. Because as long as we're doing this work, as long as we're taking the time to look at our inner world, the outer world changes. Like people that meet the world, that the outer world somehow has to change to respect or honored our sensibilities, I sometimes feel that that is a difficult position, and a position that's going to lead to a lot of pain. And not because you don't deserve it, but because the world is not obliged to change for us. And as a man who has hit many roadblocks and that were very painful, and betrayal from brothers, from beloveds, and all of that, I've had my own story. And my own story, every time I try to, like, they need to change, they need to apologize, whatever the story was, every time I went outward for the world to change, it was suffering. It was suffering. The pain is there. But when I went for the outward world to change, it's suffering. So the journey has to be an inner journey of transformation and coming to ease with what is in front of us. And that does not mean staying silent when you see an injustice. When I say the shift to the journey of the heart is the key point, it's because the heart knows when there's injustice, it definitely wants to stand for something. So stand for something, but don't let that stand bring you into suffering, because then you will have just, put yourself in a loop. So sometimes in order to self-justify ourselves, or to make our wounds feel better, or our journey feel better, we will want to change the world or justify it. Let's just do our inner world, inner work. And so I'm clear that that answer was not targeted at the transgendered man. It is more of a global answer. And to answer that journey, I'm like, whatever I just said, pick up what resonates, and whatever really doesn't resonate, flush it, because I don't have all the answers. I'm just giving a transmission of what's true for me, and what I'm accessing as my experience, and what wants to move through me. So I don't ask too many questions sometimes of all the things that I'm saying. You're on mute. You're still on mute.
Yep, am I here? Okay. It's truly about the energy off something rather than actually being a man, being a female, because as you said, like females take on the men's role. It's just this energy that has these certain traits that kind of come with it, right?
Right. Yeah, like I said, for me, absolutely, this can be take as women, as all genders, you can pick from it. And at the same time, I just want to speak the whole man piece is coming from my desire on this call, on this talk, as we claim life force, that I speak to the brothers, because we are in a difficult time. It is a time when men have to do a great introspection about how we accumulate energy, how we sometimes take and steal power from others. And I think that a big piece is around how we have to share our power. And so as a white man with privilege and that whole storyline, my commitment is to, offering transformational spaces for people to do their inner work. So I'm using my time and my privilege and my life commitment to being part of the transition team of the planet. We know we're in transition. It's happening. Summer 2020 is going to be a huge cosmological alignment, astrological alignment. You probably know more about that. Consciousness is coming through. The same consciousness download that came during the 1960s, during the civil rights movement, the feminist movement, the sexual revolution. That same dose of consciousness is going to be coming towards us in summer 2020. So it's what can we do to prepare for this? Anybody that's listening to this right now has already been awakened to a certain level. That dose of 60s consciousness has blown through them. We're awake in the water. And now when this next dose of consciousness comes through, it's what's the possibilities? Well, I'm calling all the men and I'm saying it's time to man up and do our inner work so that we can create the space for this massive surge of feminine energy and this feminine power to completely transform us. And may we not be attached to old standards of power and old ways of doing things. May it just completely wipe through us and show us what needs to be seen, almost in oracular fashion. I'm ready for that. That's what I'm holding point for, not pushing any male agenda, but it just asking the brothers to remember and remember.
Beautiful. I've noticed that there aren't too many outlets for men to come together and communicate about these topics. There are definitely men's groups around, but like I would say from my own experience, raised as a man with certain beliefs and my relationships, there's a lot of things that I thought that were just me and that it was my fault, and I'm the one exclusively having these thoughts that are distorted or whatever. But then I started talking to more men, and I realized that it's a commonality that a lot of men have, similar thoughts and beliefs, and they're stuck to having these thoughts within themselves. They don't really have an outlet to communicate about it, but it's really reassuring when you talk to men about, what kind of thoughts you have around sexuality, where they came from. You realize that many other men have the exact same thing going on. So I feel it's extremely important to start having these conversations with men and sharing with each other how we feel and think, because otherwise you feel kind of like you're all alone and you're the only one that you're having these
Absolutely. And that feeds the shame piece. That absolutely feeds the shame piece and the self-flagellation. I call it the self-flagellation. We feel uncomfortable. We think what we're doing is wrong. We live with it in secrecy. We stuff it at the back of our cave, very far back in our cave, so that we don't have to undress it, access it. Maybe we could forget about whatever it is. And ultimately, when we come together and the leadership of the circle is saying, like, here is this is what happened with me. This is how I've misstepped. This is what I've learned. This is what I've grown into. This is the potential when we take responsibility. This is the potential when we are in our power. So remember is that space. And we're going to be, our goal is to have 4 in 2020. Our next one is the beginning of May in California, June in Berlin, September in Montreal, and possibly one in Tel Aviv, Israel, later on in the year. So that's our goal for 4 men's circles. And our men's circles, our brotherhood circles are also now committing to serving the planet or serving community. So our training doesn't only end at the 5-day retreat, but we are all then engaged to commit to at least one time in the year, do something where we're actually serving the collective beyond ourselves, our story, our families.
Yeah, that's awesome. Where in California are you going to be?
We haven't decided yet. I don't know. It's gonna be coming. We'll decide soon. So all those dates that were announced are not confirmed, but they're coming up. We're about to confirm them. You could check out rememberjourney.com to stay up to date.
Beautiful. And let me know about the California one if you want any help with that, or if I can maybe come out and
Absolutely.
We can meet in person.
Absolutely. Let's
finally, right?
Seriously, we haven't done that yet. So definitely let's touch base on Remember California. Philippe is one of the facilitators as well as the organizer. So let's get him on board. I just want to say one thing, which I wanted to say earlier in this conversation. It was one of the first things I wanted to say in the conversation. And it's about men in general. I've given over 35 trainings with anywhere between 15 and 60 people per training, all genders. And in all those trainings, I have never met a man who in his spirit or in his heart intentionally or maliciously wants to hurt a woman. Every one of those men have all shown up with a deep desire to get what they're not getting, to understand something that they don't understand, to become less clumsy, to become less ignorant, self-proclaimed ignorant. And I feel that my desire, my intention, what I'm calling in for the solstice for men is, and women, is to trust that we are listening, to trust that evolution takes its time, and trust that that these spaces and these conversations are only going to be having had more and more, and that hopefully with this new dose of consciousness that we transform our education system, we transform the way we speak about sexuality and intimacy and love, romance and relating, and that we have a new generation that is less clumsy and less ignorant because we weren't so cowardly not to have the conversation around sexuality, pleasure, and our ecstasy. And I feel that possibly that conversation has never been happened because it is truly the portal into our divinity and our full power. If we really went into our sexuality in the same way we went into our sexuality with the commitments as the commitment we had to blocking all sexuality and making it evil, if we put in that same freaking life force energy in education and love and consciousness around sexuality, I am convinced that that is the pathway to our immortality, our spiritual enlightenment, because we've been blocked from that channel to God.
Right. Frank, brother, I appreciate you so much, man. Thank you for being here with us and, lending your energy to this entire thing. I love you, and hopefully I get to see you sometime soon.
Thank you for including me, and for at least once every 2 years saying, hey, brother, we got to do this. Yep. So I'm down. Let's talk for May. If anybody wants to check out any of my stuff, frankmondeose.com. So there's links to my vlog, thespiritualplayboy.com. Subscribe on YouTube. I'm on a road to 2,000 subscribers. My SoundCloud podcast, which I host a lot of content. There's meditations, explanations, some really good stuff, some jewels there. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in and paying attention. May we change this planet by letting love free. Peace.
Peace, brother.